February 17th, 1969, 2:37 a.m. Johnny Cash's living room in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Bob Dylan sat on the floor with his back against the wall, knees pulled to his chest, crying. Not quiet tears, but full-body sobs, the kind that come from somewhere so deep they hurt on the way out. Johnny Cash sat across from him on the couch, saying nothing, just watching, waiting. They'd been talking for 6 hours about music, about fame, about the weight of being who they were. But for the last 20 minutes, Dylan had just been crying. Finally, Dylan looked up, his face red, wet, broken. "I don't know who Bob Dylan is anymore, John. Everyone knows who he is except me." Johnny leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time to stop being Bob Dylan." Dylan stared at him confused. "What do you mean?" Johnny said, "I mean, maybe Bob Dylan, the folk prophet, the voice of a generation, all that bullshit, maybe he needs to die so Robert Zimmerman can finally breathe." But to understand what happened in that Nashville living room over 3 days in February 1969, you have to understand what Bob Dylan had become by then. In 1965, Dylan was 25 years old and the most important voice in American music. Songs like those about wind and change and Rolling Stones. He wasn't just writing songs, he was writing the soundtrack to a generation's awakening. But the pressure was destroying him. Everyone wanted something from Bob Dylan. The folk purists wanted him acoustic, the youth movement wanted him a spokesman, the press wanted explanations, the fans wanted to own him. Dylan felt like he was drowning in expectations. In interviews, he became hostile, cryptic, deliberately difficult, not from arrogance, but from suffocation. "I'm not a spokesman for anything. I'm just a musician, but nobody believes that. They need me to be something bigger, and I can't be that." Then came the electric guitar. Newport Folk Festival, 1965. Dylan plugged in, and the folk world erupted. "Judas," they screamed, "traitor." Dylan didn't care, or pretended not to, but the vitriol hurt. These were people who championed him, and now they hated him for evolving. Between 1965 and 1966, Dylan toured brutally, 300 shows, drugs to stay awake, alcohol to numb the pressure, living in amphetamines and hostile crowds. "I was doing too much, touring constantly, recording constantly, being Bob Dylan constantly. I felt like I was disappearing into the character everyone needed me to be." Then on July 29, 1966, everything stopped. Dylan crashed his motorcycle near Woodstock, New York. Details have always been murky, but the effect was clear. He withdrew completely. No touring, no interviews, no public appearances. For 2 years, Bob Dylan disappeared. He lived in Woodstock with his wife Sarah and growing family, grew a beard, put on weight, looked nothing like the electric-haired prophet from album covers. He made music, the basement tapes with the band, but didn't release it, just played for himself, for fun, the way he used to before everything got complicated. But isolation didn't solve the problem. If anything, it made it worse. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go back to being who I was, but I didn't know who to be instead, so I just stopped." Friends who visited described Dylan as lost, depressed, searching for something he couldn't name. He'd created Bob Dylan, the folk poet, the protest singer, the voice of a generation, and now that character had taken over, consumed him. He couldn't separate Robert Zimmerman, his birth name, from Bob Dylan, the legend, anymore. By early 1969, Dylan was ready to try something, anything. He needed to make music again, but differently, away from New York, away from expectations, away from Bob Dylan. That's when Johnny called, January 1969. "Bob, it's John Cash." They talked, and Johnny said, "I know what you're going through, the pressure, the expectations, the feeling like you're trapped in a character you created. I lived that, the man in black, the rebel, the outlaw. For years, I couldn't separate J.R. Cash from Johnny Cash. Pills helped me not think about it until they almost killed me." Dylan said, "I'm not on pills." Johnny responded, "I didn't say you were, but you're running from something. I can hear it in your voice, and running doesn't work. I tried. You just run into yourself." Dylan asked, "So what do I do?" Johnny said, "Come to Nashville, stay with me in June for a while. Make some music, not Bob Dylan music, just music, see what happens. Dylan hesitated. Nashville was country music, traditional, everything he'd been running from, but maybe that was the point. Okay, I'll come. On February 14th, 1969, Dylan arrived in Nashville with just a guitar and a small bag. June Carter Cash answered the door. "Bob Dylan, come in, honey. John's been so excited you're coming." Dylan stepped inside. It was warm, lived in, family photos everywhere, a sense of home. "It's nice here," Dylan said quietly. June smiled. "That's because John finally stopped running. When you stop running, you can build a home." Johnny came down the stairs, looking different than Dylan remembered, healthier, sober, grounded. "Welcome to Tennessee," pulling Dylan into a hug. They spent the first day just talking, not about music, but about life. Johnny told Dylan about his journey to sobriety, about hitting rock bottom in Nickajack Cave, about June refusing to give up on him. "The worst part wasn't the pills, it was losing myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. Was I the good Christian boy from Arkansas, the rebel outlaw, the broken addict, the Christian? All of them, none of them." Dylan leaned forward. "How do you figure that out?" Johnny said honestly, "I didn't. I just stopped trying to be one thing. I let myself be all of it. The contradictions, the complications, the mess. That's who we are, Bob. We're people, complicated, contradictory people." Dylan absorbed this. "Everyone expects me to be the voice of a generation, but I don't want to be that. I never wanted to be that." Johnny said simply, "Then stop." Dylan asked, "How?" Johnny replied, "Make music that has nothing to do with being Bob Dylan. Make music just for you, not for the movement, not for the press, not for anyone, just you." Dylan said, "I don't even know what that sounds like anymore." Johnny smiled. "Then let's find out." February 15th through 17th, 1969, at Columbia Studio A in Nashville. Johnny brought Dylan to the studio. Bob Johnston, Dylan's longtime producer, was there. So were Nashville session musicians, the best in the business. Johnston asked Dylan, "What do you want to record?" Dylan shrugged. "I don't know, something simple, something honest." For the first session, they just played. No plan, no pressure. Dylan sang old country songs, folk songs, blues songs. Johnny joined in on some. They laughed, made mistakes, kept going. The Nashville musicians were confused. This was Bob Dylan, the cerebral poet, the complex lyricist, but he was singing simple country songs like he was at a backyard barbecue. But Johnny understood. This was exactly what Dylan needed, to strip away everything complex and just play. On the second day, Dylan brought in new songs he'd been writing. Simple melodies, straightforward lyrics, nothing political, nothing profound, just songs. They recorded a duet together, Johnny's deep voice and Dylan's nasal voice intertwining. It was beautiful, imperfect, real. But something else was still bothering Dylan. Johnny could see it, the way Dylan would zone out between takes, the way his face would tighten when someone called him Bob. On the third night, after a long session, Johnny suggested they go back to his house. "Let's just talk, no recording, no pressure." And that's when everything broke open. They sat in Johnny's living room. June had gone to bed. It was just the two of them, whiskey on the table, silence filling the space. Johnny asked, "You want to tell me what's really going on?" Dylan didn't answer for a second. He stared at his glass. Then quietly, "I don't know who I am." Johnny asked, "What do you mean?" Dylan said, "Everyone knows Bob Dylan, the folk singer, the protest guy, the voice of whatever, but I don't know him. I created him, and now everyone sees him. Robert Zimmerman doesn't exist anymore, just Bob Dylan, and I don't even know who that is." Johnny leaned back. "You're not the first person to feel that way." Dylan asked, "How did you deal with it?" Johnny said, "I didn't. I hid in pills for 10 years, almost killed trying not to feel it, but eventually I realized something. Johnny Cash isn't a character. He's just one version of me, the public version. But J.R. Cash still exists, the kid from Arkansas, the brother who lost Jack, the father who failed his first family, the addict, the Christian, all of it. They're all me." Dylan asked, "But how do you integrate all that? How do you be all those contradictory things at once?" Johnny said, "You just do. You stop trying to be one coherent thing and you let yourself be messy. That's what being human is all about." And that's when Dylan's face crumpled and the tears started.
deep, heaving sobs. "I'm so tired, John. I'm tired of being Bob Dylan. I'm tired of everyone wanting something from me. I'm tired of pretending I have answers. I don't have answers. I don't even have questions anymore. I'm just empty." Johnny moved from the couch to the floor, sitting next to Dylan. He didn't hug him, didn't try to fix it, just sat there. Dylan said through tears, "I don't know who Bob Dylan is anymore. Everyone knows who he is except me." Johnny let him cry. For 10 minutes, Dylan just broke, released years of pressure, expectations, identity crisis. Finally, when the sobs subsided, Johnny spoke. "Then maybe it's time to stop being Bob Dylan." Dylan looked up, confused. Johnny continued, "I mean, maybe Bob Dylan, the folk prophet, the voice of a generation, all that bullshit, maybe he needs to die so Robert Zimmerman can finally breathe." "But Bob Dylan is all I have," Dylan protested. "No, Bob Dylan is
All I have," Johnny said. "No, Bob Dylan is what everyone else has. Robert Zimmerman is what you have, and he's been suffocating under Bob Dylan for 5 years." Dylan asked, "So what do I do?" Johnny said, "Make an album that has nothing to do with Bob Dylan. Make an album that's so simple, so unpretentious, so unimportant that nobody can project anything onto it. Make an album that just exists. No message, no movement, just songs." Dylan said quietly. "Nashville Skyline?" Johnny asked. "What?" Dylan repeated. "That's what I'll call it, Nashville Skyline, because that's where I am, literally, not metaphorically, just here." Johnny smiled. "That's perfect." The next morning, Dylan woke up different, not fixed, not healed, but lighter, like he'd been carrying something heavy and finally set it down. He and Johnny went back to the studio. Dylan had a new energy, not manic, not forced, just present. "I want to finish the album," Dylan told Bob Johnston, "but I want to keep it simple. No overdubs, no tricks, just the songs." They recorded the rest of the album over the next week. Dylan sang in a completely different voice, smooth, crooning, almost country, nothing like the nasal singing everyone knew. Critics would later say Dylan had sold out by making a country album, that he'd abandoned his principles, that Nashville Skyline was a betrayal of everything Bob Dylan stood for. But they missed the point entirely. Nashville Skyline wasn't about country music, it was about survival. It was Dylan choosing to be human instead of a symbol, choosing simplicity over complexity, choosing to exist instead of represent. Johnny understood this. In the liner notes, he wrote about Dylan's greatness becoming more obvious, but what Johnny didn't write, what he couldn't write was, "Because I watched him break, and I watched him choose to keep living anyway." Nashville Skyline was released in April 1969. The response was polarized. Folk purists hated it. Rock critics were confused. Country fans embraced it. But Dylan didn't care about any of it. For the first time in years, he'd made an album for himself, and that was enough. In one interview, Dylan was asked why country music. His answer was simple. "Because Johnny Cash showed me it was okay to be simple, and I needed simple." Asked if he regretted leaving protest music behind, Dylan said, "I never chose protest music. Everyone else chose it for me. I'm just a songwriter. I write what I write." Asked what he'd say to people who think he's sold out, Dylan smiled, a real smile, not the smirk he usually wore. "I'd say I finally bought in to my own life." Before Dylan left Nashville, he and Johnny had one final conversation. "Thank you," Dylan said simply. Johnny asked, "For what?" Dylan said, "For showing me it's okay to not be Bob Dylan all the time, for showing me I can just exist." Johnny nodded. "You gonna be okay?" Dylan said honestly, "I don't know, but I feel like I can breathe again, and that's something." Johnny warned, "The pressure won't go away. People will still want you to be their voice, their prophet, their whatever." Dylan said, "I know, but now I know I can say no. I can just make music. I don't have to carry the world." Johnny put his hand on Dylan's shoulder. "Bob or Robert or whoever you are in any given moment, you're not required to be anyone's savior, not even your own. You're just required to be honest. and you're finally being honest." Dylan looked at Johnny, two men who'd been drowning in their own legends, who'd found each other at the right moment. "If you ever need to disappear again, you know where to find me," Johnny said. "Thanks, John, for everything." They shook hands. Dylan left, and Johnny watched him drive away, hoping he'd be okay. Nashville Skyline didn't save Bob Dylan. It didn't solve his identity crisis. It didn't make the pressure disappear, but it gave him permission to be complicated, to not have answers, to make music without the weight of representing anything. Over the next decades, Dylan would continue to reinvent himself. Christian albums, blues albums, rock albums, and every time critics would say he was betraying his legacy. But Dylan stopped caring about legacy. He'd learned in Nashville in 1969 that legacy is a prison, and he was finally free. Johnny and Dylan remained friends, not close. They were both too restless for close friendships. But when they'd see each other at awards shows or festivals, there was always a knowing look, a nod, an acknowledgement of what they'd been through together. In 2003, shortly before Johnny died, Dylan visited him one last time. Johnny was frail, dying, but his mind was sharp. "You ever figure out who Bob Dylan is?" Johnny asked with a slight smile. Dylan laughed. "Nope, still don't know, but I stopped trying to figure it out, so that's progress." Johnny said, "Good, that's all any of us can do. Stop trying to be one thing and just be all the things." That was their last conversation. When Johnny died 3 months later, Dylan was one of the few musicians who didn't issue a public statement, no tribute, no quote for the press. Instead, he played their duet at his next concert, just him and his guitar, the way they'd played it that week in Nashville. And that said everything. Today, Nashville Skyline is considered one of Dylan's most important albums, not because it's his best, it's not, but because it represents a turning point, the moment an artist chose humanity over mythology, simplicity over complexity, survival over symbolism. And it happened because Johnny Cash, sitting in his living room at 2:37 a.m., watched Dylan break down and said the thing Dylan needed to hear. Stop being Bob Dylan, just be you. That's the lesson neither of them ever forgot, that the characters we create, the man in black, the voice of a generation, are useful, but they can't be all we are. Because underneath Johnny Cash was J.R. Cash, a kid from Arkansas who lost his brother and never got over it. And underneath Bob Dylan was Robert Zimmerman, a kid from Minnesota who just wanted to make music. And when those two kids met in Nashville in 1969, they saved each other, not from death, but from disappearing into their own legends. And that's a different kind of salvation, but maybe the most important kind.